Track two. Welcome to the Business of Ransomware. Please give a round of applause to our speakers.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome. My name is Stefan Summerroth. I'm the Senior Director of Security at Avant Communications. I've been in security for quite a while. Responded to my first incident in 2001, hacked AOL Instant Messenger encryption 3 different times on 3 different versions before I went to West Point, electrical engineering, went to the Army Infantry Ranger School, Afghanistan deployment, switched to the Army CPB here at Fort Gordon, medically retired, started a company, sold that company, and just moved to another position right now where I focus on enabling cyber teams all over the country, all over the world, to find the best products in order to bring them in and solve their own problems. Also not here today is Sean Eyre. He came down with COVID, similar background, West Point computer science and military intelligence. Army Cyber here started a nonprofit, so if anybody wants to volunteer and give back, you can absolutely do it with that with Sean. We'll give you his contact information after. And Adrian Tillston.
How's it going? My name's Adrian. Very similar background, West Point computer science. Very excited about Backtrack when it first came out and introduced Metasploit to this young man when he was a young shining buck. And these days, since I got out of the Army after doing infantry and special forces stuff, I was a government contractor writing offensive security software and then built my own company doing cybersecurity consulting and vCISO stuff. And then most recently, that company was acquired, and now I am the cyber practice lead at a place called Resourcive, who helps basically take that same experience and help people build cyber programs for their companies, because I think everyone in this room can agree that it's actually really hard.
So if you do happen to see Sean, please heckle him, because out of the 3 of us, he's the only one that hasn't sold a company yet. So case study. Adrian and I get to come in and talk with clients all over the world, all the time, from every vertical to every location, whether it's financial services companies, consulting companies, oil and gas companies, you name the company or the level, small and mid-sized business to mid-market to enterprise. And when we come in, we get to try to help them build their security postures, go find the vendors that can actually solve their problems. So the case study that we're looking at right now is one that we see all the time, and both of us know this company because we're actually channel partners. We get to work together and work on the same problems. So the drive into Augusta yesterday, we drove together, we worked on a presentation, probably less than we should have, because we were working on clients. So this is one of those clients. Adrian, who is this client? What do they do?
Yeah, so we're going to be as anonymous as possible, but everybody keep this as part of the introduction to how we'll frame the rest of the conversation. So let's just say that somewhere out there across the country, there's a small business who needs assistance in some way with like operations, payroll, et cetera, right? So let's say that a different company, our actual case study company, has built this awesome system, and they're going to help train affiliates that will go out and bring this new capability to those local businesses. So there's like a commission system and everything. And they've got everything built out. They build all their in-house dev teams. So no real contractor base, but they do it all hiring W-2. And they have all the capabilities that you would expect from like startup mid-market, where you're doing business development, market research, and kind of have all that broken out. So really quickly, it's a little bit important to talk about the background of this because they're rapidly growing worldwide, right? So there is some, they're seen as the market leader. There is some huge publicity, both in the United States and in Europe. Last year, it's estimated, because we only do estimations because we can't talk about private companies and insider knowledge, but they did about 180 million in revenue, and with only about $6 million in operating costs. And that's a pretty amazing profit margin, right? So if you were called to evaluate this company for some type of investment or public offering, and you were part of the company that's got to come in and do some type of assessment, where would you start? Audience participation, just shout it out. Anyone? Asset inventory, thank you. What was?
CIS Control 1, asset inventory, right there.
There you go. Any others? All right, so let's keep this case study just in mind as we move forward, right? Because this organization is going to come back to play later.
So what we're talking about today, the first step is know your enemy. And that means we obviously need a Sun Tzu quote. We'll get to that in a second. And then we'll look at some actual ransomware notes from Conti. We'll take a look at Conti's business model, because this talk is the business of ransomware. And of course, the actions on the objective. What do you do when you get the call? When you get the call. Hey, we're under attack. What do we do? Because everyone in here will at some point get the call, and it'll be your job to respond, to stand up, and to help lead either your company or a partner company through a time of duress. So what do? Let's answer that. So back to Sun Tzu. This is the original Mandarin as far as I can tell, and it effectively says, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. So that means we'll build a table, because that's what we do, right? If you know yourself and you know your enemies, you're invincible. If you know yourself and you don't know your enemies, you got a 50-50 shot of winning. And if you don't know yourself and you don't know your enemies, you're dead on arrival. So for those of you that are of the older generation, you remember Rocky IV, he puts Drago's picture on the mirror and looks at it every day when he brushes his teeth. We're going to do the same thing. Threat-informed intelligence. Absolutely understand your enemy. And I can tell you, and I know Adrian can as well, many times when we show up to an organization and we start asking them about their posture, where are you at? What are your goals? What's your vision for security? How does security enable your company to go to market and win? They don't know what they have. They fail at syscontrol 1 of inventory. So how can they possibly become invincible if they don't know their adversaries, they don't know their enemies, and they don't know themselves? So 2022, Verizon DBIR, the Data Breach Investigation Report, phenomenal output for anybody that's in here that has not read any of the DBIRs. Strongly recommend. Go read them, pull them up. They're written for executives, which means they're written for kindergartners, so they're really easy to read. So when we look at them, why do breaches happen? What are the motivations behind the actors that are actually conducting breaches? 88% of all breaches that Verizon looked at were motivated financially, for dollars. 11% were from espionage. So for this group, you're probably going to look at that quite a lot as well. But for outside in the commercial space, 88% is financial, and then there's some other things that go in there. So obviously, if 88% is financial, that's where we're going to look right now, and who better to look at than Conti? So here's the fear. I know Adrian's gotten this call many times. I've gotten this call as well. The CIOs in the room, the directors in this room have gotten this call. You're sitting in traffic, you're driving, and your phone rings. So since you're a good participant, you keep one hand on the wheel and you swipe and you answer. And you can hear someone's voice trembling on the other side of the phone. As you imagine them, you can see them shaking because of how much their voice is trembling. And they can't even describe to you what they're seeing and what's happening at the company. And eventually they say, just open your messages and look at the picture. So you pull over, you hear the sound of gravel underneath your tires on the side of the road, and you pull up the picture that they just sent you, and it's a picture of a locked desktop. It's a picture of an actual Conti ransom note that they just sent you. Thank you to Sentinel Labs for providing this. Let's jump into the actual ransomware note. All of your files are currently encrypted by Conti strain. As you know, if you don't, just Google it. All of the data that's been encrypted by our software cannot be recovered by any means without contacting our team directly. If you try to use any additional recovery software, the files might be damaged. So if you're willing to try, go ahead and try it on some data of the lowest value. To make sure that we really can get your data back, we offer to decrypt you 2 random files completely free of charge. You can contact our team directly for further instructions through our website as follows. You should be aware, just in case, if you try to ignore us, we've downloaded a pack of your internal data, and we're ready to publish it out to a news website if you do not respond. So it'll be better for both sides if you just contact us as soon as possible. Now that's a sales note, if I've ever seen one. Hey, look, here's your proof of value. We'll give you 2 files for free to prove that we're honorable thieves. And then, oh, by the way, we've got a help desk because we really want to support you through this process. So let's peek behind the curtain. How do we know this information? In 2021, a disgruntled employee, a disgruntled county affiliate, leaked the gang's whole playbook. The whole playbook. Translated from Russian into English. It's out. You can just go download it. It's their entire play-by-play playbook. All of it. Easy. We can read it now. Now we know it. It's not us sitting in a room thinking about how it's happening. It's not the cuckoo egg. It is actual how they operate. And then, oh, by the way, after Russia invaded Ukraine, kind of a bad leadership decision in my opinion. Like, hey, if we're going to go align with Russia and a bunch of our devs are in Ukraine, we're kind of pissing off our employee base. Maybe we shouldn't do that, but they did. Conti came out and pledged its support for Russia, and then the Ukrainian side of the house said, that's not cool. Screw you, boss. And they leaked 170 internal chat messages out to the internet. And all of those have been translated to English as well. So this isn't theoretical, this is operational, it's actually what happened. And you can go read it too, because it's there. The links are in the articles. All you got to do is go take a look at them. So who are they? As we look at the ransomware market itself, we've got our professional criminals and we've got our state-sponsored criminals. Professional criminals, LockBit owns 38% of the market of ransomware. But they haven't had 170,000 articles leaked, so we'll come back to them. Conti owns 20% of the market. They're the second biggest market share owner of the ransomware market, and we happen to have a ton of their data, so it's ripe for picking. You also see Revel and Hive, and then of course, state-sponsored, which as far as we know, Conti's not necessarily attached with Lazarus Black Shadow. These two threat groups are also really interesting because they target their own people in order to generate the revenue to continue to operate. They eat their young.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah. So we're going to look at Conti. And we're going to look at initially whom, not what or how. This is a Microsoft publication that looks at the healthcare industry, some of the larger threat groups that target the threat industry. We will come back to RDP brute force, I promise. But first we're going to look at whom. So they have an ecosystem. Adrian, tell me about the ecosystem.
So this is one of the greatest decisions that they've probably made, and the differentiator that separates them from someone sitting in their basement in their hoodie, which I actually enjoy in my basement with my hoodie, and separates them into like an actual professional organization. They have separate companies that they're enabling. You can see Conti all the way up in the top right as the actual operator, right? But as you start looking at the left, it's a separate business entirely, an initial access broker. All they're doing, this organization, is going out and trying to find some foothold. Doesn't matter what it is. They can use RDP scanning and try to look for something compromised. They can try to buy some credentials off the dark web, maybe for your organization, maybe for like a third party, like a supply chain type organization, maybe someone that you've allowed into your network that you're not really tracking as well as you should, or just pretty much anything you can imagine, right? All the fun stuff. They're going to take that information and that initial access and that foothold, and they're just going to go right back to the affiliate of Conti themselves. This is the person who is going to expand that access and start executing all of the actual, they're the ones who push the magic button that says encrypt, right? So they're the ones you got to worry about. We bring this up because it's a process. It is a legitimate business transaction, just like contracting a separate company to do some type of initial assessment, I don't know, like a pen test or a risk assessment, and then taking that information and doing something internally with it, deciding, and now actually executing your full roadmap and your playbooks that you have internal to your organization, right? So as they do that, they're gonna develop persistence if it hasn't already been created. But what do developers and these types of organizations lack? The experience in negotiation, maybe the development experience if they're actually gonna be using some type of exploits to advance their movement throughout the network. All of that is created by Conti. They help negotiate all the payments so the ransomware as a service affiliate doesn't have to. They're really taking all of the strengths of all of their organization and leveraging that through the affiliate model and just getting a commission from everything. It's pretty slick.
So when I first saw this model, I took a look at it and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Of course it makes sense to outsource to another partner who's going to then outsource to another partner. We see that all the time. We saw that in Army Cyber. We continue to see it in corporate environment. But as I looked at this a little bit closer, I realized that this is the channel sales model. This is what we do on a day-to-day basis through effectively brokering to enable companies to come in and win. Now the question then becomes, if this is what they do to attack, are they better at it than us? They're definitely more well-funded. Are they better at it than us? And who is going to win in this model?
Before you do it, who in here has like a good percentage for some type of sales funnel, right? What's a good conversion rate? Anyone? 10%, okay?
10% is pretty damn good.
If you have a 10% sales funnel, I would like to hire your organization to build mine right now. Anyone else? 5%, okay? Yeah, so depending on what you're selling, it can be anywhere between like 1 to 2 is like a good conversion rate. Or if you're like doing some type of 5 to 10, right? So let's
look at their funnel. So Conti will give out a list that says, hey, give us 2,000, or I'll give you 2,500 potential target organizations. 2,500. Of those, the access brokers will take a look at it. They'll skim through the list. Maybe they'll do a control F. Maybe they'll sort alphabetically. They'll pick 60 organizations to actually maybe start to target. Out of those 60 organizations they target, they'll successfully compromise 20. And out of those 20, they hand those off to Conti, and Conti says, oh, great, 20. I'll pick one.
So looking at this from the perspective of like, what is your actual conversion rate, right? If you're into sales, if you've done any type of research, right, the top one is like looking at Crunchbase. It's like looking at PitchBook, right? You're just kind of looking through like who's actually available. We'll try to see like what companies are out there that might be great targets or opportunities for us to reach out. And then you start getting into like 60 organizations actually got sent emails. And out of those 60 emails, 20 of them sent something back saying, we would love to buy your product right now. That's the equivalent of what's happening here. That one that gets compromised isn't the real victory because there are 19 other ones who are banging at the door saying, please take my money. I would love to buy your product. Like 33% conversion, I think that's pretty good.
Yep. And oh, by the way, this is just one org. There's all of Conti's competitors are doing the same thing. And they're in those 20 successful organizations as well. So Conti gets to sit there and go, hey, who do I want to give me money today? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Or is it you? Give me money. So let's look at their actual playbook. This is the first page of Conti's playbook. Paragraph 1.1, company revenue search. Google dork. Google company name plus revenue. Now the interesting thing here is that it says revenue, it doesn't say profit. Profit is revenue minus cost. It just says revenue. And then they say, okay, now that you know the company's revenue, why don't you go out and take a look and see what other information you can get? Owler, Manta, ZoomInfo, DNB, and RocketReach. They misspelled RocketReach. So those are the same tools that your sales teams are using. The exact same tools. So I beg the question again, is your sales team better than Conti? Are they using the tools better than Conti's using the tools? And are you incentivizing them correctly to go out and help actually protect? Because if you truly believe in the product set that you have, the services that you have, are you doing the right work and going up against Conti to go protect your clients or not? Because everyone in this room is mission focused.
Okay, so now that we've gone through this, let's take a quick look at what this organization looks like, right? So local businesses lack refined tools to actually accomplish their goals. They're a platform empowering local businesses with support, software, training, maybe a help desk, pricing, right? Who is this? This is actually Conti, right? So this is not like some mid-level organization that's built out their organizational structure based off, like mergers and acquisitions over time and PE firms and operating partners coming in and advising them. No, this is like the criminal organization that is trying to attack and lock down all of your networks right now.
So it's funny because as we look at it, when we go out and talk to companies like this and help them with their security pipeline, their programs, it is exactly organized the same as Conti. This is Conti's organizational chart. So let's dive deeper into their org chart. So on the left, we'll come back to R&D and HR in just a minute. On the right, their business development team. This is where they have actual ransomware negotiators, and we'll give you, towards the end of the talk, actual negotiations, a screenshot of negotiations going back and forth. This is where they have their acquisitions teams that are going out and looking for new malware sets or new C2 frameworks or other actual pieces of crypto ransomware. They're going out and acquiring the software and the tools and other businesses in this space, other mafia groups that can come in and help mature their organization. Finance. You can't have a criminal enterprise without money laundering. So they do. Of course they do. And transaction management. And of course, we already talked about their affiliate groups. Now let's jump into R&D and HR. So as we jump down into it, here's their actual handles. So at the top, we have the big boss, Stern. So Stern, when you go through and you look at his chats, of the 170,000 chat messages that were leaked, Stern is all over the place. This guy, we believe him to be a guy, is out talking with other ransomware groups all across everywhere, potentially talking to nation-state actors, talking to everyone. He understands the market, he sets the vision, he sets the revenue targets, etc.
The CEO going out and networking with all the other rest of the industry.
Yep, what do? They fight up and out. Then we have Salamandra in HR. Salamandra is really interesting because in HR, his job is to go out and identify more people to come in and do the talent management piece. So he will go post legitimate job descriptions on legitimate websites, do legitimate interviews, and then eventually pivot to the dark side when he thinks he's found the right person in order to bring them in the organization. Once he does have someone, if they don't have quite the right skill set, but they got the right mentality, obviously you got to train them up, right? So he hands them off over to Twin on the training organization who trains them, puts them through an actual training pipeline. And then once Twin puts them through the training pipeline, he hands them off to either A team, B team, or C team. So if you look here, you'll see that A team has one leader, and B team and C team both have two. Because these orgs independently, these units are large enough that they probably need two leaders. But Rosetka is kind of a jerk, huge ego, and honestly not a boss that I want to work for, but then again, it's the mafia, so who are you going to complain to? Not Salamandra. And then underneath of them, they've got their own developers. They each have their own pen testing crews. They each have their own OSINT teams, their own admins, and here's the part that I find really interesting. They all have their own QA. They've got really strong QA because they want to make sure that if they encrypt you and then you pay them, that they're actually going to give you a decryption key and it's going to work.
The nerd inside me wants to look at their CI/CD pipeline and just kind of see how bad their unit tests are, because I have to imagine they can't be that good.
Good enough to work.
Yeah.
And of course, reverse engineers. Now, we haven't talked about blockchain with Colin yet, or the blog with Bio. So Colin basically runs all the crypto ransomware development itself, so the encryption keys that they're running back and forth that the dev teams use in their CI/CD pipeline to go out and deploy. So he's very focused, smaller team. Blog with Bio. Bio runs the blog. They call it blog internally, but this is their marketing arm. This is where they go through, and when they do extract data, they publish it out to the internet. This is where anytime that you see a Conti rebrand, Conti shut down, they did a thing, they retired, Bio does all that marketing. And then they rebrand as something else, and they stand up again, and they do, or they pivot, or they do a divestiture, or maybe they go acquire somebody, and now they're calling themselves something else. Bio runs all of that. Wicked smart on marketing. So I know we're talking to mostly engineers. Don't hate your marketing team. They do good work. They keep you employed, actually.
So who's a target? If you have revenue, you are a target. This is not about targeting a specific company because it's some political act, right? We go back to that reasoning for ransomware attacks. 88% are all just financially motivated. You're not special. I hate to say it. I know you love your company, but you're not really that cool. If you make revenue and you have some misconfiguration in something, right? Who in this room is 100% certain that their organization is 100% free of all misconfigurations on any public-facing nodes? Anyone? Great. I do not have to buy anybody a beer, because that would be the first time out of all the times we've done this that someone actually raised their hand.
There's actually, I like the big chuckles in the back.
But that's why you have to prepare. That's why you build your security program, because if you have revenue, you are now a target.
So who's actually getting hit? Who are the targets by the market? As we look at it, we'll start off with the big orange one, healthcare. So if you go read the reports, the industry reports like the DBIR, healthcare, you see huge expansions in the healthcare space. But there's something that you also see in healthcare where you see the highest percentage of security leaders in healthcare saying, we believe that we are good. That tells me that the ego inside of healthcare is higher than the actual performance and ability.
Which we'll get into
in a couple minutes. Media and entertainment, who remembers the Sony breach? Yeah, huge, right? So that hasn't gone down. Again, thank your marketing teams for giving you a job. Energy. We're going to see energy continuing to go up. We're starting to see new policy and regulations coming out all over the world that are driving things to continue to update the IoT and SCADA devices that are part of your delivery and energy systems. But they're also, we know that they're weak. And the bad guys know that they're weak, and it's a play. They know they can't do too much in oil, gas, and energy, because then they'll start having Five Eyes partners come after them. So they just have this little heartbeat that goes back and forth. Now, financial was going down. Financial was going down because the finance industry is ahead of the game, and they're mandated, by law, to be profitable, so they've got the dollars to invest in security, et cetera, and they don't want to go to prison. So they were going down. Why it's going back up again is because of cryptocurrency exchanges. Because the crypto might be damn good, but if the exchange security sucks, the crypto doesn't matter. Place your money accordingly. This is not legal advice. The other thing I want to highlight in this one is that sliver, the kind of the brown sliver of higher education, specifically because we're in a higher education institution right now. When we look at higher ed, bad guys can wait as long as they want, because there's only 2 weeks a year that are important to higher ed. One is in the fall, and one is in the spring, finals week. Universities get hit during finals week. So if universities get hit during finals week, you know they're going to pay because they have a responsibility to their students who are paying a ton of money to go to school. So they're going to pay the ransom. And we're seeing institutions close their doors that have been open for 100 years because they didn't invest into security. I'm not telling them to go spend hundreds and thousands or millions of dollars in security. What I am saying is advocate to build the right security programs. IDPRR.
I think we all know that there are steps that you can take in your organization that are baseline steps that cost very little money, right? Just segmenting your network is appropriate. Actually having role-based controls and leveraging any type of multi-factor authentication in your existing systems. Doesn't matter what they are, just doing some basic stuff can reduce that east-west movement once they make their initial footprint, right?
And that kind of comes back to the hiring and talent piece as well. So obviously sponsored by Security Union, Doug Burke's, great product, freeware, et cetera. Almost every boot camp in security is teaching Security Union. So great option for everybody in the room. If you're designing a program, design it around the systems that are both free, that you can just go to a boot camp and hire people straight out of, because they're already learning the tools that you use. Pick the tools that people are learning, and then you've got a whole talent development pipeline. You don't have to go out and try to find talent because they're right there. More on that to come. So let's talk about the pyramid of pain. There's a couple of them, and you've already seen some today in different talks. The big one is give us dollars, right? Give us money. We ransomed your stuff. And what we usually see in the news media is, hey, we locked your computers up with crypto ransomware. Give us money. But that's just one piece of extortion. We're seeing double, triple, quadruple extortion all across the industry. So it's not just, hey, we locked your computers. Remember the ransomware note? We also extracted your data, and if you don't pay us, we're going to leak it out, and everyone will get to see it.
And if you're a healthcare organization and you have personal health information, the leak of that is going to come back and bite you even more when you start getting penalized and fined, and your customers start going away because their information is not safe, right? So, sorry, Benji read as you're taking a drink.
Oh no, you're good. Now there's a couple other pieces here that we're seeing. This next one is not specific to Conti yet that we have seen or that we know of, but if you have access to all your, an organization's computers, and you get access to an executive's computer, and you get access to their webcam, and you can pay somebody a couple dollars a day to just watch the webcam footage and see if anything weird happens, and then you can blackmail the executive as well, what better leverage than, hey company, please give us your money. hey, we saw what you're doing on your webcam, and you should really approve that expenditure, or we'll release that too. So we're starting to see that more often. And then, by the way, why not kick a dead horse when it's down, right? DDoS, cheap, fast, easy, just kick them. Hey, pay up. We're going to shut off your ability to go to market and make new revenue. So bad guys are smart, they're wily, they're well-funded, and they just want to take money. They'll do whatever they need to get those dollars. Great, we talked about who, let's talk about how. So initial access. Adrian, walk me through initial access.
Let's just throw out the RDP stuff right off the bat, right? Like you probably shouldn't be running too much RDP, especially with like weak credentials, and we'll move on. But like vulnerable internet-facing systems, how misconfigurations of normal services, whether that's something that your dev team stood up in a test environment that happens to be publicly facing, that is going to be leveraged to get through the rest of your organization, or it's like someone in HR or marketing who's clicking something that they probably shouldn't. I am guilty, at least historically, of blaming the human for clicking on phishing links. Like, how could someone be so stupid? And then I, personally, had COVID and was laying in bed and was super exhausted. I had a fever of 103 and had a lot of brain fog. I had a splitting headache, and I like leaned over and had this email and was like, wow, that's weird. For those of you that are in the DoD back in the day, on-prem enterprise like Outlook would have this limit of your mailbox size. And so once you actually hit a certain limit, because people are sending like 25 megabyte files, you end up getting an alert saying, hey, you're not going to receive any more email if you don't clear out your inbox. And I got one of those for my Office 365 account, right? That's not a thing. I think we can all agree that like I'm not over my storage limit. But for a split second, that was all it took for me to click on that thing. Luckily, I have other processes in place and didn't actually input my credentials on the splash screen that came up later, but it happens, right? And so processes in place to identify that inside your organization that are free, right? And have your playbooks. I know there's a lot of conversations that we've talked about actual incident response while we're here, right? That's all stuff that you can do for free. You don't even have to spend a lot of money on a solution for that. You can build your program to help that. And that's why we're starting to see like underwriter scans, right? And so in cyber insurance, has anyone here in the commercials world, like has their cyber insurance gone up in the last year? Because like depending on who you're talking to, the amount of increase is anywhere between like 50 and 400%, depending on what they can actually attest to.
With decreased coverage.
In their renewal, right? And so when you start reading those pieces really carefully, you realize that you may not be covered, but that's like a whole nother separate conversation.
Yeah, so we're actually seeing underwriters, a number of them in the space, some of the billion-dollar valuation insurance underwriters, doing attack surface mapping and scanning prior to even giving you a quote. Because if you do have 15 vulnerable RDP sessions, ipso facto, what the hell does the rest of your network look like? Okay, and then we get to how. Pretty standard stuff. What's easy? Run Mimikatz, use Cobalt Strike, make a new account. Playbook hasn't changed. Oh my God, security changes all the time. It moves so fast. Can you keep up with security? Can you keep up? It changes. Nah, shit don't change. Hasn't changed in a long time. We just replaced like Metasploit with Cobalt Strike. That's it. The process doesn't change because people don't change. So if we were on a red team engagement, we were attacking somebody like a corporate environment here in Augusta, what's the first thing that you're probably going to do? You're going to VPN and put a POP here in Augusta, and you're going to go buy some creds so that way you can log in local, coming from a local node, to look normal. Because that's what persistence is. It looks normal. The goal is to look normal. And if the goal is to look normal, it's going to happen very, very fast because you can automate all that stuff. So let's look at the timeline. Darktrace, one of our partners, love them. They do great work, and they put out great content. So this is an actual example of Conti ransomware. Initial intrusion, August 1st, proxy shell vulnerability. Boom, got in. August 13th, 12 days later, SSL connection to an external endpoint, C2, cool. August 14th, 1 day later, lateral movement. August 14th, 0 days later, data exfil. August 14th, 0 days later, data encryption. So what happened between those 12 days of initial intrusion and C2 communication? Was that just a timer that was waiting? Or was that the amount of time it took organizationally for the access broker to then get that information over to the lateral movement company, to their third party, to then go through and then hand off to Conti? You start looking at the organizational structure, the timelines start to make a hell of a lot more sense.
Another case study, right? So this is the health service executive of Ireland. And so if you are not familiar with it, Conti hit them and shut down the entire system. And generally, Conti, for public affairs reasons, doesn't usually want to hit hospitals because there is no better way to have the strongest nations in the world start looking for you than to start shutting down like critical infrastructure in hospitals and start causing people to die, right?
Every hospital in Ireland.
But even like affiliates have problems. So if you take a look at this one, just with initial infection, right, of like March 18th and persistence achieved on the 23rd, from like a red team or like bad guy perspective, right, that's probably the initial access broker who is trying to send out some type of phishing campaign throughout, the entire organization of every hospital in Ireland, and all of a sudden finally gets a callback and finally checks that, or has worked through all the rest of the callbacks in priority order and is compiling his list of targets to send. Because once they establish persistence, they don't actually see any additional movement until the 7th of May, when they compromised the first server. After that, now we're starting to talk about the actual affiliate getting in and expanding their access. Hospital C identified malicious activity. Hospital A communicates alerts of malicious activity. The attacker browsed folders based in the actual HSC infrastructure itself, right? Attacker compromised 6 voluntary and 1 statutory hospital. This report is publicly available, and it's a great report. But this is over 4,000 locations, 54 acute hospitals, and 70,000 devices, right? So in the end, the only way that they were able to recover from this is because Conti realized that they had really screwed up and gave them the decryption key. Our bad, sorry guys, here's the decryption key. At that point, the only way that Ireland and called the military, called Interpol, could stop it was shutting off all of the IT access for every healthcare facility in Ireland in the middle of a COVID pandemic. Talk about if that was a private company, right? Lost revenue, because it took 4 months for them to decrypt everything with the decryption key and with the Army's help. So for those of you out there on the Army and the CPB, be ready to just start running some decryptors on, critical infrastructure if it happens here,
So one of the interesting pieces during this period, right, they're out for 4 months. The doctors went back to paper. The nurses went back to paper. A clipboard with a pencil, like a Neanderthal, drawing on it and saying, hey, do surgery on this leg, and then walking it with the patient and giving it to the surgeon to make sure they could do the work.
And to be even more scary, how many of you those have actually had operations, like major operations or sicknesses, right? So I have, and I definitely did not go to the same x-ray place or blood work. None of those were in the same place. I went to blood work here, I went to get my x-ray at this other lab that was outsourced, blah, 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 and then I showed up for my actual surgery at the hospital where the OR was. So imagine your x-rays and your lab work having to follow you from 3 different locations so that you can get into the room with the surgeon to cut the right leg. Brutal.
So we talk about changing our mindset. It used to be, we could keep them out. We've got a firewall. And then everybody said, it's not if, it's when. That's old too. Zero trust. Assume compromise, because the bad guys are already here. Once you realize that they're already here, then you architect, you build, you deploy, you maintain with a different mindset, because your mindset's changed and you continue to move. And this is not a new concept. John Kindervag wrote about zero trust decades ago. Google adopted it a decade ago. They're already here. They already have persistence. Because, oh, by the way, when you talk to CEOs, one of their biggest fears, you sit down and you ask them, they're like, well, it could be a new competitor entering the market. It could be a supplier variability. It could be the demand market. But I'm actually really scared about one of my sales team leaving and taking their whole Rolodex and all my clients. That's an insider threat. Bad guys who are already here, because they're already here, they're already inside, and they're a threat. Bad guys are just an insider threat. This is what we're fighting. This is what we're fighting, because this ransom note could also just be a picture from a competitor on their LinkedIn where you just realized that one of your sales or marketing or developers or engineers took your intellectual property with you. It doesn't have to be a ransom note. It could just be a LinkedIn update. We promised we'd show you some actual negotiations. Look, there's lots of words on a slide. Suffice it to say that bad guys are jerks. There's no honor among thieves. They just fight back. And here's the irony. Is anyone there to help us? We want to have a conversation with somebody, but if only with somebody that's going to be professional. We gave you the price. It's reasonable and offensive. Huh? Offensive? Yeah, this is coming from a bad guy that's attacking you, and then when you come back and say, hey, could we get some help? They call you offensive. Talk about the mind tricks. There's some Jedis up in here. So escalating, what happens when you do get the call? When you do get the call, you don't have to be a Jedi Council level incident responder to be able to help someone. Just ask questions. I don't recommend making statements during an incident response. I recommend asking questions. Have you talked with legal? Oh, shoot, I haven't looped legal into this. Okay, just wait on that. Want to look at your plan. Have you talked with marketing? I need to talk to marketing about a breach? Well, you might, because if they don't have themes and messaging that they can go to take to market to inform your stakeholders, you could potentially avoid all sorts of legal repercussions or lawsuits or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's call incident response. Oh, by the way, do you have your incident response and disaster recovery plans available? Yeah, we do. Hold on. Whew.
I'm just impressed they actually had it printed.
Right. So then, if you don't have them and you don't have them updated, that could be fine, but you actually have to have them and follow them. And then you decide when you need to deviate from them, because there is a thing called failure to follow in the insurance industry. And if you don't follow your own plan, how prudent were you really being? And then, by the way, since incident response might be coming, have you prepared to review logs? How long can you get access to logs? So obviously the goal here, there's a million incidents that happen every hour. Those incidents get triaged, and some of them become events become incidents. The goal is to keep the breach square as small as possible. Keep events to incidents and keep breaches to incidents and incidents to events. So what's the actual cost? You do get ransomed, your company gets ransomed, and they pay it, maybe. That payment is probably only 15% of the total cost of ransomware attacks. We're on the East Coast. I'm sure you all remember Colonial Pipeline. Why did Colonial get shut down? Their SCADA system didn't get shut down. The oil delivery system didn't get shut down. Their financial team got shut down. So they couldn't take new orders. And if you can't take new orders, how can you deliver? So that's where the vast majority of cost comes from, is the inability to go to market. And here's a future. This isn't science fiction anymore. Conti actually targeted the Costa Rican government. They shut them down. They deployed ransomware. Okay. That sucks. Here's the part that really hurts. Is Conti came in and they said, you're going to pay us, and if you don't, we're going to support a coup against you. Not science fiction anymore. Non-state actors driving potential government changes.
Right, we had that slide about not state-sponsored. How long until new opportunities become available to those states that are sponsoring? Right?
It's not theoretical anymore. So who gets hit? Do you got dollars? You're a target. So we take a look at it. Conti raked in $77 million in 21 months from ransomware. Almost 2,000 bitcoins, depending on quantity and dollars. They do all right. Don't go join them, by the way. This is not a marketing campaign for them. This is to inform you on what they do, how they operate, so that way you can look yourself in the mirror and say, are they better than me, or am I going to be better than them in order to protect my constituents?
And like Stefan said, it's a competitor mindset, right? If you are part of a business and you are analyzing all the competition in your market and you're trying to do your actual like business continuity plans, not necessarily focused on like cyber, right? But new competitors to the market, changing landscape of like legal regulations, why would you not view someone coming in and stopping your revenue as a potential competitor, right? Take it just as seriously at the board level as you would any other revenue affecting object, right?
So, make sure you know yourself, and make sure you leave time to know your adversary and your enemy. Because if you want to not fear the outcome of 100 battles, you got to know yourself and know your enemy, otherwise you're dead on arrival. Thank you very much. I'm Stefan Summerroth. This is Adrian Tillston. Unfortunately, Sean and Eyre couldn't be here. We'll go into questions, but before we do, want to let you know that we both have job openings right now, and the Army Cyber Institute up at West Point is also hiring bachelor's, master's, and PhD levels. So if you're interested in those, they're mostly sysadmin development type work. They are hiring. Let us know. We can go help you. What questions do you have? How can we help?
We also have prizes. So I think the two guys that actually helped us while we were going, we'll get to unless there's more questions. But I'll run around the audience.
Say shirt color.
So for Conti, did their training module also get leaked?
The question was for Conti, did their training modules get leaked? Not that I have seen. It doesn't mean that they haven't been. It just means that I have not seen them. Did you have a follow-on question? Okay.
Who's responsible for taking down organizations like this?
Great question. So it's a combined public and private effort across a joint multinational force. That's kind of a
Who was that?
out of an answer, right?
Who's the first person?
Target like hospitals and places that will get like too urgent of attention, but I mean this is a pretty huge problem for all countries. It isn't like you're just targeting the US.
Yeah, so the question is generally who's responsible for going out, like if we know the exact stakeholders with Stern and Salamandra and Twin, who's going out and targeting them to take them out? I say take them out, what I mean is take them off the market. So generally Interpol, but Interpol just came out with an article, they said publicly, I think it's 4 months ago now, I'd have to go back and look at the date. Interpol said we cannot arrest our way out of this problem because the financial numbers are too high. That's the first point. So there's like supply and demand. The demand is very high for these people. And the second part is because of extradition. So if you look at Conti, remember the vast majority of their playbooks and the messages were written in Cyrillic. So Russian-speaking adversaries, and we're not really known for having a great relationship with them between Five Eyes and Russia. Yeah, yeah, either protected actively or at least have a tacit blind eye. Great question.
Interpol takes a lot of, they need to require a lot of evidence to prosecute anyone and then
Yeah, so the book that I generally recommend reading about that problem to dig deeper into that is called Hack 99, and it starts by looking at intellectual property loss as a case study with China, and it also looks at Europe a little bit as well. So it's a former FBI investigator that was looking at a lot of these problems in the beginning, in the nascent state of this, and trying to get bureaucratic momentum in order to actually take bad players off the field.
I guess in the meantime, it seems like we just kind of have to accept that they're there and they're operating as legitimate business. No one can do anything about it right now. It seems kind of
Unfortunately, that means everyone in this room will be employed for quite some time.
Back to that competitive landscape, international.
There's a question regarding their political launching. So because of United Nation state backing, are they just dropping by the local FedEx, or not FedEx, but Wells Fargo to drop off cases? Like, how are they doing?
The question is about money laundering. So the vast majority of the inbound dollars come in through Bitcoin. They are starting to shift a little bit, but every time they shift the currency, they actually have to switch their help desk processes in order to coach the people that they've attacked on how to swap money around. And then they throw it into, they generally do they'll come in through Bitcoin, they'll spin it through a couple other cryptocurrencies, and then output, and then they've got like banks on the mend that they'll launder through as well. So to that end, I forget, Ripsaw, I think, a recent cryptocurrency that was just completely banned because there's legitimately no legitimate reason for its use other than anonymizing input and outputs and identities of where money's coming in and going. So its purpose is to anonymize.
You start tumbling all that stuff?
Tumbling.
Yeah, like I don't want to go too far into it because I am not that knowledgeable, but like general concept is you throw a couple Bitcoin in with some other people that are throwing in Bitcoin, and then a bunch of different addresses get moved all around all over the place, and you can't track those transactions across the blockchain anymore. And so there are like technical solutions to how you actually money launder through different transitions. I'm not an expert, but that's generally how you can, if one were to want to money launder, that is like one way.
Super hypothetically speaking. Yep. Which have we got?
Exchanges are also being cracked down on. That's like one of those pieces now. So.
Yep. 4 more minutes. Yes, sir.
Tornado Cash was the.
Tornado Cash, thank you. The Tumblr.
All right, so
The really cool article about Tornado Cash, probably the best name of an article recently, was called OFAC Around and Find Out.
So hypothetically, should I spend my security budget on a marketing campaign directed at ransomware actors that says we do not negotiate with ransomware actors? And if you do, I have friends in the FBI. That would be better than spending a bunch of money on security.
How good are your backups?
They're probably not as good as the marketing campaign targeting the hack.
Okay.
I don't have to be better than everybody. I just have to be better than my competitor.
So,
I mean, then you start elevating your
yeah.
desirability. Ego definitely plays a part. They're not generally attacking people for political reasons, but like aligning with Russia, right? That kind of goes down the ego road pretty quickly too.
And effectively, if we go that route, what we're basically doing is inducing the prisoner's dilemma in all of our peers. And if 10 of us say we're not going to do Bitcoin payments, but one does, the market is still there, and we will continue to tumble. So
one really funny thing that kind of goes along that line was at the conference like a week and a half ago, was someone actually asked the question, like, would you spend $50,000 on a tool or some piece of technology, or would you spend $50,000 buying Bitcoin now, knowing that you're going to get hit later while Bitcoin's a little depressed, right? So like we know we're going to get hit. We'll get a deal right now, right? Let's hope that we can hedge this against the next 3 years and it'll go back up. Yeah, that's
maybe consider that as part of your holistic security program, but not the program.
So you said 15% of the overall cost was the payment of ransomware.
Uh-huh.
Is there suggestions on how to lower the other 85%?
Yes.
Like, okay, they're doing their good work, and let's give them their 15%, but let's not make it as painful.
Yeah. So the question was because ransomware, the payment itself is only 15% of the total cost. What else can you do in order to drive that down? Yeah. So a large portion of the other 85%, and forgive me, I don't have the precise numbers, is that loss of the ability to go to market. So like if you're a B2C company and your platform shuts down and the customers on the C side can't access your business, then suddenly you can't have transactions and you don't have revenue coming in. And it's that lost revenue that drives up the cost so much.
And also, just thinking about it from a different perspective, like once you've been breached, how much do you trust your infrastructure, right? Like, well, we think they came this way. We think this is what they did. This is what the logs say. Is that truly the only place that they went? Do they have persistence in a different system? Because you're going to get hit multiple times with ransomware now, right? Like you paid $500K and they're like, got you good. We'll just detonate another one, right? So rebuilding your infrastructure also comes into that cost because how much does everyone in this room make, right? You start counting up labor hours and
overtime labor.
And overtime, incident response, hours for consultants to go. I would assume not many people in here have an internal incident response team that is like able to go through that level, minus maybe the CPB. But.
Yeah, and if we ask the question, do not raise your hands on this, but if we ask the question in here of who's on an incident response team, many of you would raise your hands. And if I ask the follow-on question, who is the incident response team, because there's no one else, almost everybody would still keep their hands up, right? More questions?
You said they do have backup. How long does it still take to get everything back up?
When was the last time you tested your backup process? How long does it take you to actually implement a backup on a system, A to Z, including all your configurations for all your network interface devices, right? Because you're probably going to have to make sure that there's no additional, access control list adjustments, right? Something letting you through the firewall. So you got to rebuild all of those configs. How long does it take you to, with like the Irish HSE, 70,000 endpoints? They had to decrypt it because I don't know what the backup process would have taken, but probably longer than the decryption,
And specifically, if we're looking at it a little bit tighter perspective, I believe it was LockBit. I was falling asleep as I was reading the article because it was bedtime. But they were building new tools that specifically target like Veeam. Veeam is a backup engine. And so when bad guys will go to the same conferences. And so when they walk in, everybody's like, oh, I'll just restore from backup. And I rehearsed my backup, and we tested it, and it was great. Bad guy's sitting there going, I guess I got to attack the backups more.
Or
cool.
How long ago was that backup created? Did you, because they were there for 8 weeks, right, with persistence on an endpoint? So
if I gave you the statistics, the standard deviation would be stupidly large. Yeah.
I'm sorry. It depends how big you are, and it depends what you're recovering. I hate to give the consultant answer, but that's what I'm going to double down on, because HSE with the decryption stuff took them 4 months with the Army, right? So think about your organization. And
so let's use a specific example here, and one of our co-clients, who shall remain unnamed, they have basically an IoT flat network that has 0 backups. And if they were to put their entire team, security and IT and sysadmins and help desk, on just building the backups, it would take them about 6 weeks just to build the backups one time, not to mention all the operate and maintain that goes along with that. Because they didn't get it baked in they didn't bake in security originally. So as we look at it, it just goes on and on and on, kind of like my answer right now, which means we are done, I believe, so the next speaker can come up. Is that correct? All right, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you coming in. I hope you learned something.
If